Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Katie Otaggio. I'm the Engagement Operations Manager for Envision's College Success Program. Today's webinar is What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up? Resources and tips on navigating your journey. So before we get started, I just wanted to share some housekeeping items. Questions will be during the latter part of our time together. So please utilize the chat box or use the raise hand function when that time comes. You can put comments or questions in the chat throughout the webinar, but we will not address them until the end. If you are on a PC, the commands for raising the hand is Alt-Y, and on a Mac, it's Option Y. If you're joining from the mobile app, under the More button, and so we'll call on the names of those with hands raised, and you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask your question. So again, welcome. My name is Katie Otaggio. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the speakers we have for today. All of them are CSP mentors, so they work with the CSP program. They mentor students that are in the program, and all have a great wealth of experience and knowledge to bring to the webinar. So first we have Preston Radtke. Preston has a BA in Public Relations and Creative Writing from Ball State University and an MA in Emerging Media Design and Development, also from Ball State. Preston is a specialist at Zoom, and additionally, he is an adjunct lecturer within the School of Communications and Information at Rutgers University. Advocacy and equity are the driving passions behind his life and work. Preston's passions include digital equity, service dog advocacy, and improving independence through the disabled world. In his spare time, Preston enjoys trying new foods, listening to records, and exploring new places with his seeing eye dog, Burton. Next, we have Caitlin Mongillo. Caitlin has a BA in English and Secondary Education from Manhattanville College and a master's in social work from Stony Brook University. Caitlin is a social worker in Southwest Connecticut. Currently, she works providing counseling, referrals, and support to individuals navigating Connecticut's court system. As a social worker, she advocates for equality, listens with patience, and believes in the inherent worth of all people. In her free time, she loves to read, write, and spend time with her amazing family and friends. Caitlin is excited to share her experiences, both good and bad, with the next generation of BVI leaders. Her favorite words are laugh, hope, and possibility. And last but not least, we have Sam Van Der Swaagh. Sam has a BA in Unique and Interdisciplinary Studies from City University of New York. Sam grew up in New York City in the West Village with his large family of 2 sisters and 3 brothers. He was homeschooled through high school along with his siblings by his outstanding parents. Sam has experience in tutoring college freshmen and sophomore level courses such as stats, biology, and chemistry. Although Sam's major during college was applied psychology and neuroscience, he is currently pursuing a career in textile design. His interest for writing changed. If Sam is not in the studio weaving carpets and fine fabrics, he spends his free time swing dancing, training for long distance runs with friends, or experimenting with origami. Sam's artistic passions are certainly bolstered by his visual impairment that drives him toward tactile forms of expression and affords him a unique perception of the world. Sam's visual condition consists of albinism, nystagmus, and astigmatism. He is a large print reader, yet often prefers listening to audiobooks or utilizing speech-to-text options. Sam also enjoys talking about the latest science and technology. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Preston, and he's going to get us started. Preston?
All right. Thank you, Katie, and thank you, everyone, for showing up today. I do apologize. I've actually turned my video off because in the Chicagoland area where I am right now, we actually have some really bad storms, and I've actually lost power. So I figured no use turning my camera on if there's no light, and just to save battery on my phone. Anyway, so I'm going to be your moderator today, and I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to our webinar today, and then I'll just run through about 9 or 10 questions that I'll pose to Caitlin and Sam, and their amazing insight will hopefully provide you with some great resources for today. So as the name entails, today's presentation will be focused on finding your career path. Not necessarily finding a specific job, but looking for different resources so you can figure out what job you want to do. Sam, Caitlin, and myself both have unique journeys as to how we, came to work in the fields that we work in. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some great insight and some resources that you could parlay into your own lived experiences. Some of the key points that we will be hammering home today involve career exploration options, who you can turn to for help when looking for different career exploration, different ideas and things to consider throughout the job and career exploration process, available resources to assist you throughout that process, and what happens once you decide to potentially change jobs or change career trajectories. So with that, I'm going to move into our first question here. So there's a quote that is often talked about in this space. It goes, figure out what you love to do and then get paid to do it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, sometimes that's a lot easier said than done. So Caitlin and Sam, what are your thoughts on whether it's better to follow your dreams or to be practical? And in your opinion, is there a middle ground? So let's start with Caitlin.
So thanks everybody for having me. I hope you're having a good night wherever you may be at. I think this is a really interesting question. And I know for me, I'm a big dreamer. I'm one of those people who likes to envision a world that I don't live in right now, where I have $1 million and, a giant horse farm or a cabin in the woods where I can just write the great American novel all day, every day. So I'm very much mired in dreams. And I think dreams are really important, but I also think goals and reality is important. Making a living and making a life for yourself are, really what most people want for their futures. And what we at the College Success Program would want for you. So I often think too about when I'm mentoring students and even for myself, what kind of passion do you have? And how might this look into turning something into reality? So maybe you're a scuba diver and your goal in life is you want to scuba dive the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. That's a great goal, I think, but maybe there are some practical steps that we can take to get there together, in terms of maybe you want to start out being a scuba diver instructor, and then maybe you want to go on some local dives before you can save up a lot of money to travel to Australia and spend your time scuba diving there all the time. So I think taking a passion and looking at the reality of what that passion may be is a good way to kind of balance out dream versus reality. So saying, for myself, I'm not going to become most likely the greatest new novelist. I don't think I'm a strong enough writer, and I don't think I have the passion enough to write all day, every day. But maybe in my spare time, I can find a local anthology where I can get a poem or two published, or I can work during the summer to teach the creative writing workshop we offer. I can do something like that still gives me a time to practice that passion, but doesn't say that has to be the career I'm jumping feet first into.
Sam?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, just to add a few more words, I was fortunate during the past several years to pursue my passion and to do textile designs and to work like work all day on weaving carpets, and that was great. This is something that sort of a career change that surprised me. But to be honest, the situation right now is that certain careers highly depend on the market, right? So even right now, I'm looking for alternative forms of work because of the market. And I'm looking specifically into tech, like data analytics. And so if you want to go headlong into, for example, into the arts, you just have to know that that market's very volatile. It's not it's a tremendous thing that always experience some sort of form of growth and reward, but it's very much tied to how the economy is doing. And tech, on the other hand, is it's an ever-growing field, and people don't see, and companies don't seem to have enough employers in that area. Yeah, so stability is something that I've been had to reconsider, even right now. Yeah, I think that's the only words I would add.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. So kind of a start with a vague question here, and I'll get a bit more specific. So broadly speaking, how did you two find your careers? Specifically, when you were growing up, did you have any parents or mentors who attempted to sway you or kind of lead you towards a specific career? Or did you kind of identify what you wanted to do all on your own?
So I can start with that one if that's okay. So when I was in high school, before high school, in middle school, I had lots of dreams. I was going to be an actress. I was going to be a veterinarian. I was going to be a novelist. I was going to be, oh goodness, a million things. A professional horseback rider. I was going to be pretty much everything all the time. And then when I got into high school and realized what is it that I actually like to do and started kind of applying myself to my schoolwork a little bit, I realized that I really did like reading and writing. I was really passionate about them. I was really, really a rather good English student. So I realized, maybe I'd like to be an English teacher. I really cultivated good relationships with my English teachers. I found them really interesting. I knew I liked, younger students and helping them and tutoring them and things like that. So that was what I went into college thinking, very confident actually that I was going to be doing. And I know that I had some people in my life who kind of adversely tried to sway me away from that as a passion and, say, well, you're blind. Why don't you just become a teacher of the visually impaired? You're a really good self-advocate. Why don't you, kind of look into that as a career field? And I was always very much against that because I wasn't super interested in teaching all the subjects. I was very confident I wanted to teach English. So I did have some people who kind of tried to talk me into different things, but I was sort of adamant at the time that I was 18 and starting college, I was going to be a high school English teacher. And I stayed true to that until I was 22 and drastically changed my mind, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, my family grew up, me and my siblings were all artistic in some form of fashion. Some went into music, some went into the visual arts, some went into teaching, like the arts. So it was kind of like natural that I gravitated towards textile design. I had countless mentors who were, helping me think through how I would make this sustainable, and then would support me through the process. But my real breakthrough was when my cousin invited me to Berlin to learn how to hand weave. And this was at the tail end of college. And I wouldn't say like during my senior year of college. And I had a tremendous time. My world was flipped upside down. All I wanted to do was weave. And I was attracted to the hands-on work, but also just the technical aspects of making fabric and carpets. 7 years later, I'm still doing it. And I've been privileged to be able to pursue it without anyone batting an eye. My family has been very gracious in supporting me in this process. But I would say that my situation is very unusual. most sensible people would say, what are you doing? Do something more practical. And I've benefited from that, but also right now I'm being even right now confronted with the reality of what I should do. Should I continue this? So it has its trade-offs, but I guess also my situation's pretty unique. Most people would dissuade, practical people would have dissuaded me from this path. But I was given the flexibility to pursue this.
Awesome. I kind of actually taking this in another direction. So me personally, my dad worked a very grueling sales job. So he'd leave home at like 7 a.m, come back at midnight. And unfortunately, more often than not, he did not sell very much, and it seemed very stressful. So it's a very long way of saying that he dissuaded me to not go into that field. But apart from that, I kind of, I found my own way. I was fortunate enough to be exposed to different individuals who worked in certain careers, but certainly none of them said, okay, this is what you're going to do when you grow up. They allowed me to kind of have that independent freedom, as it were. All right, so moving on. So what are some ways that you could, or that Sam and Caitlin, that you have utilized vocational rehabilitation services, or VR, to help you figure out what sort of jobs you'd like to have? Let's start out with Sam this time.
Okay. Yeah, the vocational rehabilitation has been, I would say, very instrumental in just giving me the guidance to think through things. Even right now, I'm like, whenever I like review my resume, just those tips that I had learned during those programs, are still relevant today. And I can't say that like I use them to the most advantages that I could. Like, I'm sort of regret that I didn't use them as much as I could have back then. I was very, very much gung-ho on doing my own thing. But looking back, I really benefited, like, as far as like, even just forming a cover letter, which is, a very difficult thing, but the template, that they gave me, I still use today. Or the thinking through, what do you want to do, like in X amount of years, or like, is this sustainable? Those type of questions, and those and like vocational tips, I still carry through even today. So huge advocate of at least being thorough with your resume. You don't want to be lazy in that area.
I know too, for me, I similar experience kind of to Sam, that I sometimes regret not using vocational rehabilitation to the umpteenth level that I could have. But I know from my experience of being a mentor and working now with students all across the country, I've been really impressed by a lot of the vocational rehabilitation services that I've seen students be provided with, that I think really help them in terms of the career journey they're taking. So I've seen students do things like, over the summers, when they're on break from college, get internships through vocational rehabilitation in the job that they hope to do one day. So I had a student who was interested in working kind of at like a social services agency. So she spent the summer working as a receptionist at the local human rights office. And not that she was doing the casework, but she was, getting a chance really to spend the whole summer learning about the clients that came into a place of that sort, working with the caseworkers, working with the lawyers, the social workers, things like that, to really learn and see like what might that experience be like. And then the next summer she worked at a organization for kids who had, disabilities and illnesses, kind of doing some like case management stuff there. So vocational rehab, I've seen help students specifically who are in college to get them in touch with internships in the world of work that they hope to go into or studying. And I've seen them do some really great things in terms of job shadowing, and like Sam mentioned, those soft skills, that job development kind of resume writing, career planning, cover letter things. So I think that those are some really, really good services that if you're a student right now, you could be maybe reaching out to your VR counselor saying, hey, I want to learn more about this field in real time, not just from my textbook. And I think that's a great experience that a lot of people aren't necessarily given. And it's a good way too to make some money over the summer.
Definitely. Ditto to what Sam and Caitlin said. Sam and Caitlin, could you maybe talk about flashback to a few years ago when you were kind of going through your career exploration? And this is kind of related to the first question we had today. Can you just share some tips or practices that you use to form and then narrow down your list of careers? So a list of careers that you're interested in. So let's say you had, let's say, 5 different careers. You want to be a chef, you want to be a dog groom, you want to be a librarian, you want to be, I don't know, a race car driver, an astronaut. Can you maybe talk about what practices or thought activities you use to kind of eliminate and kind of curate that list as you grew older? Caitlin, you can lead us off this time.
Sure. So I am a big fan, even in my life right now, of the pro and con list. I'm a super indecisive person. So even, making lists for, different activities I want to do, or, different brands of, phone to buy or whatever it may be. Big fan, and always have been, of the pro and con list. So I did actually do this when I finished up college, and sort of had like a change of heart. Because up until that point, as I mentioned earlier, I was adamant I was going to be an English teacher. That's all I wanted to hear. That's all I wanted to do. And then when I sort of realized that wasn't exactly where my heart was at, I had to kind of pivot and think. So I did look into careers that were more aligned with where I saw myself in the future. And I made pros and cons lists about each of them. What kind of schooling would this require? What did the job tasks look like? I did a lot of research online to find that information out. What was the salary? What kinds of things could I see myself not liking about the job, or could I see myself really thinking were great? And then from there, I did tend to narrow down what I wanted to do. And that sort of defined what I pursued in terms of graduate school, and eventually what I'm doing now. So big fan of the pro con list.
Yeah, I mean, just like Caitlin, I'm a person who who is a little bit more spontaneous. So I have to use a lot of self-discipline to like create a list. But one other thing that sort of helped me through this process was also just experiencing it, do an internship, really like just double checking if I'm really gun-ho about something. And that process, like right after college, right, I was entering college, I wanted to go into a field called ergonomics, which is specifically like in designing assistive technologies for the blind, like O&M tools, and designing how you use it and how it all works. But by the end of like the senior year, like around the time I discovered weaving, I was working on these projects, and they were cool, but like I couldn't see myself doing that for the rest of my life. I learned a lot from those projects, and they were very cool projects. I was able to like do need analysis on O&M tools, and using different metrics and things, and it was very stimulating, but like it was just long term. I could not see myself sustaining that sort of type of mental type of work, and I really needed something hands-on, and it wasn't as hands-on as I thought it would be. And so yeah, I explored weaving for like did a 6-week internship, and I just knew that that's what I wanted to do, and it was just it was more realistic than I thought it would be, just during that specific time. it's different times now, but and just thinking through the process of what it looks like, what is my plan for the next few years to make this really work. And fortunately, I had a tremendous amount of support behind me. People weren't saying you're crazy, and like really double checking myself. And it was really grueling work. I had, I weave 18 hours a day, so it's not like I didn't really dive in. So I guess my advice is do an internship and see if you really like it, or explore it in college with majors or projects. That's what I would do. If you don't like the list option, just widen your experience.
Awesome. All right, guys. So the next question is, I want you to speak or to talk specifically to your personal experience. So when you've decided on a career, or you could even apply this to a job, maybe talk about the thought processes that you've used, and maybe talk about how you knew that this career or this job was a good fit. So I guess in other words, like, how do you know that the career that you've entered into is a good fit? And maybe also talk about how maybe that process can change as you remain in that career longer term. And Sam, you can take this one. Go first.
So I guess it's similar to like what I answered before, is it seemed like a great fit because I'm a very tactile person, and my my creative sense and my passion to create things that that's very practical, and also and like high demand, like textiles are always seem to be needed. People need to wear clothes, people always want carpets or something, and so it just seemed right at the time. But just to jump to the latter question, like it is something that I'm continually reevaluating, and I think textiles will always be my passion, and I'm grateful for the long period of time which I've been able to pursue this as a career, and I've benefited a lot for even professionally. But I think you don't want to, even when something's like really great, you still want to be realistic. And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm looking into tech jobs. I got a certificate in cloud computing recently, and it's interesting work, and it's I am more than willing to do like mercenary type of work to support a passion. But at the end of the day, you have to be very realistic and find something that pays the bills, and like think about how that's gonna fuel that passion. You don't want to do a job that's gonna take your creative engine away, like exhaust you. So tech really made sense right now, so I'm pivoting again. I'm changing my mind again. So I think reassessing things occasionally also is even if you land a tremendous career, it's a good idea as well.
And I kind of feel that, for me, I'm a very introspective person. So I check in with myself a lot. Internally, how am I thinking? How am I feeling? And as Katie mentioned at the top of the webinar, I'm a social worker right now. So I kind of pivoted. Sam mentioned that term a lot, and it resonates a lot here for me. I pivoted from teaching to social work. And as of about a year and a half ago, I went from the job that I had been at for 7 years, what I lovingly refer to as my first big girl job. And I'm doing a different type of social work now. I was working with people who were unemployed and homeless families and people with disabilities to help them all find work. And now I work in the legal system, working with people who are incarcerated or who are facing charges. And all of my clients now are living at or below the poverty line. So, some of the things that I'm doing now are similar. And the goal is similar to, help people get on their feet, help them live the life that they want, and be empowered within themselves. But I did pivot, because I felt like, okay, I've been at this agency now for about 7 years. And I've learned a lot and I have acquired a bunch of skills, but I like a challenge and I like to kind of grow myself as a professional, as a social worker, and learn more about working with different populations, and taking the knowledge that I gained from that previous job and bringing that into this new role that I have now. And also learning, from what I'm doing now. And as per the first part of the question, Preston asked us, how do you know it's a good fit? For me, I know because I feel it. There's a lot of days that are really, really hard and really, really challenging. And I, feel wrung out by the work that I do and by the clients that I work with in terms of the situations that have brought them to working with me, which are often very sad and very frustrating, because systems can fail people and that's hard to see day in and day out. But I see also too, the work that I do make a difference for people. And there are a few feelings as wonderful as that when I can come home and say, wow, I really, I got this person into drug treatment, or I helped this person find a job, or I made sure that, this person's case ended successfully and they don't have a criminal record. And that's going to help them a lot. And it makes my heart happy. And I think that that's why I know it's a good career for me. And it was the same thing when I was doing, the other work, working with the homeless families too. I felt the same way a lot of the time. My heart's happy to do this. That's why I think this is a good job for me.
Awesome. Thank you. So next question, I want to shift gears a little bit, talk about graduate school, be it getting a master's degree or a PhD or doctorate. Sam and Caitlin, could you maybe talk about kind of the role that attending grad school or getting that higher educational degree, how that could assist you in your job career exploration process and even your job prospects process, and maybe just talk about maybe loop it back to yourselves, like how you considered graduate school, whether you attended or not, how that could have impacted your career journey. We'll start with Caitlin this time.
Sure. So I have a master's in social work. When I left college, I was applying for teaching jobs, but I sort of struggled to find something, and I had done student teaching and realized like, oh, hey, I don't care so much about students' essays quite so much. And that's when I made my lists of jobs that I really felt like led more to the passion of helping others. What did that look like? So that's, something like a clinical mental health counselor, a guidance counselor, a psychologist, a social worker. I made my list of pros and cons. I did my research online. I talked to people who had those different jobs. And I realized, okay, yes, social work is for me. It's the most broad spectrum. I can do the most with it. That's the time, that I was thinking. And I realized that, a lot of the jobs that I was looking for in the social work arena, it would say master's required. So for this particular job, it turned into, okay, I need a master's degree. I got to go get that. So sometimes it means looking at the job that you want to do and realizing, okay, hey, let me look and use my resources online or use the connections that I made in the field to find out, is a doctoral degree, a master's degree, a certificate, something that I'm going to need 100% before I can get this job? Or is it something that I should have so that I can come in working at a higher level in terms of the pay that I'm looking for? Or, in terms of the something to set me apart from the other candidates. So that's kind of how I weighed going to grad school or not.
Yeah, so I didn't go to graduate school, but it's something that I'm still considering doing. The reason I haven't done it is because I wanted to gain experience in the field. Like, for example, when I was doing textile design, they often recommend you not to immediately go back to school, because a lot of like mills are looking for hands-on experience, right? And they're looking for if you can actually do the craft, and like if you want to show to like a design studio that your work, they don't always want to see like university type of work, but like the reason that you eventually do want to go get a graduate like degree, particularly in design, is that it just elevates your opportunity tremendously. There's a term called master weaver, master craftsman. You only earn that with a degree, like it's not something that you just gain with time. So that is something that at one point I wanted to pursue, but as I've mentioned earlier, most likely the degree I would pursue now, as far as getting a master's, would be something in data. I've already gotten a certificate, and the thing that would push me over to getting a degree in data science would, if I wanted to become more of a data scientist. But certificates are good to get your foot in the door. Like, there's something you can show it immediately to an employer. But if you want anything beyond that, and advance in a very technical career, you want something that shows that you're specializing in something. So those are my thoughts.
Well, I think you guys bring up some phenomenal points. I'm just going to expand on them just a little bit. So this question, I think, is potentially the most unique to every single person in this call, because it's completely dependent on what industry you want to go in, whether it's really a necessity to go to grad school and when you go to grad school. So for instance, if you want to be a counseling psychologist or psychiatrist, you pretty much have to get a master's degree. In some instances, you have to get a PhD. However, if you want to work in marketing or if you want to work in sales, really you can do very well for yourself in just getting that bachelor's degree. A lot of that is more kind of on the ground experiential work. A second ago, I said when you get your degree, that's also important because on the one hand, some people believe that once you graduate from undergrad, that's actually the best time to go and get your graduate degree, because traditionally students who graduate when they're 21, 22, they don't have as many life concerns such as children or a family that would potentially inhibit them from going back and getting that degree. However, other people feel that it would actually benefit them to be out in the working world and work for a few years to actually get that degree. There are also some industries that require that. So like, I know if you are a nurse, you have to get your undergrad degree in nursing, just a traditional 4-year degree. But if you want to kind of get any bit of a higher, like become a higher, like a nurse administrator, you have to be working as a practicing nurse for at least 2 to 3 years before you can actually go back to school. And the final point I want to bring up is, as opposed to undergrad, when you are in grad school, be it getting a PhD or getting a master's degree, fortunately, there's a lot more avenues for getting financial assistance. On the one hand, you could work for the college, you could work for the university that you're at. So when I was in grad school, I got my master's degree in emerging media. I essentially was the co-director of a technology lab, and that basically paid for my entire tuition. It gave me a stipend. And to be perfectly honest, if that wasn't in existence, I would not have gotten that master's degree, because I'm very grateful I got my master's degree, but I didn't necessarily need it for my career. And there's a lot more targeted scholarships. And also, if you do research for your university, they're more likely to provide you direct aid, either waiving your tuition, giving you a stipend. Whereas in undergrad, there's just a lot more people in the pool. So there's a lot less money going around. And then the final point I want to bring up is, depending on where you work, many businesses and employers will actually pay for you to go back to school, as long as what you are learning can be directly applicable to the job that you're currently doing. Of course, there's typically a vetting period for that. So for instance, the company that I work at, they will cover, I believe it's 70 to 80% of your tuition or your academic fees should you go back to school, but you can't do that immediately. You have to be working at the company for like, I think it's like 2 to 3 years. You have to get approval from your boss. But that is also an option. The TLDR here is there's lots of financial incentives to be going back to grad school, but you should always make sure that it's something that is necessary for your career in this moment. So I'm actually going to jump down to our last question, because the question before this we've actually already answered kind of in previous answers. So Sam and Caitlin, when deciding to leave a job or a career, could you talk about some of the key indicators that kind of gave you the idea to kind of take that U-turn? It could have been, interaction with someone in the industry or looking at the trends of the hiring market. Just talk about some red flags that you identified that, kind of convinced you to, like I said, look elsewhere for employment or look elsewhere for a career. And we can start with Sam this time.
Sure. So I would say to that, because I've experienced that twice now in my life. The first time in which I had to do a U-turn or felt like I needed a U-turn was that a lot of the work was rewarding in many ways, but I wasn't getting I wasn't able to use my hands in the same ways that I thought I would, like not even just like literally, but like being able to engage with the analyzing process as close as I thought I would be initially. Like I was doing labs with computer science programs. I was doing labs with like EEG labs, or like looking at the brain waves and things. And this was a time when I was pursuing neuroscience, and it was very cool work, but like I was applying to different internships and people weren't understanding that like I was getting red flags because the type of work that I was delivering, people weren't saying was, sufficient enough. It wasn't really fitting what their lab was doing. And so like, I thought the type of work was, was a particular thing, and it was a different thing. So that was like mostly it. And also I realized during the process that I am not built for research type of work, like academic research. I learned a lot through the process, and came out on the other side with a greater appreciation for people who do that type of work, but it wasn't for me. It's a type of mentality that I don't have. If something is too academic and abstract, and that's all you do all day, you don't get to touch it or manipulate it, engage with it directly. That's just not how I'm wired. So, but right now, as I am reevaluating my career again, the red flags are different. They are sustainability as far as my physicality. Like, weaving is a very physical labor. And like most people at during my stage in this process would have already like transitioned to a different type of work in this field, but I've just been doing just the manual labor. And I'm not able to go back to graduate school at this point. It's too expensive. So the more practical thing is to pursue something in which can finance this passion, and to not wait too long, because the ability to show employers, hey, I haven't been, I'm able to pivot, right? Like I'm young enough to switch careers. I don't have a lot of corporate experience, but employers are looking people still my age. I'm still 20s, and I'm thankful that I'm still able to change my job, but I can't sustain this for another 5 years. I have to make a switch. So yeah.
And I think it's sort of approaching this from kind of an angle of something that Sam mentioned at the start of our presentation, that I think is just a really important part. So I want to touch on it, even if it doesn't really answer the question, is Sam mentioned before thinking about the market, right? The labor market. So I think one of the ways that folks should look into their careers and say, is it time to go? Sam's reasons, I think, make 1,000,000% sense. Is it sustainable, this job that I'm doing? But also, I think, there's a lot of information out there. It's called labor market information and analysis. So there's a great website. We didn't 100% touch on it about, like online aptitude tests and things like that. And this website that I'll mention is mynextmove.org. That's mynextmove, all spelled out, .org. And this website does have accessible online career assessments, which is something that if you're feeling that red flag feeling, you might look into and say, okay, well, let me just dive back in and take one of these career assessment tests. You can also look online for Myers-Briggs type indicator tests. There are some that are free online. But My Next Move, once you take a career assessment test, that's an option for you to sort of see like, if not this job, then what? But there's also a page on that website, which will tell you the outlooks for the different careers you're looking at. So based on where you live, maybe you're living in a more industrialized area. So careers in machine operation, factory work, are more in demand right now versus, maybe somewhere else, tech is kind of the biggest thing, computers, cyber, stuff like that, or maybe it's healthcare, or maybe it's the arts. You can kind of break out the careers in terms of, is there a bright outlook, which directly correlates to how easy is it to get a job in this field? So maybe that's something you're looking for too, in terms of, I really just want to position myself as best as I can to be able to find a job after I finish my education, or as I'm contemplating, okay, well, I have my bachelor's degree in history, and now what? So I think that's a really good resource to look into, both taking career assessment tests to sort of guide your next steps, but also looking at some labor market information to see, what does my area support? That's something that I feel like I might be interested in as well, and kind of collating those two things together.
Great points. So I will add quickly. It's also it's important to know your worth. Obviously, you don't want to. I guess this speaks specifically to when you're deciding to leave a job or leave a career, with the assumption that you think that you could earn more elsewhere, working for a different company or working in a different industry. There's obviously a fine line between identifying that you could be earning more and thinking that, and kind of being deluded into thinking that you deserve more. So I would always say, no matter where you're working, just always keep an eye on the industry that you're in relation to how much you're getting paid. And just ask yourself if you're happy with that, in relation to also like how much effort and how good of a job you're doing. The specific example that I'm thinking about from my life is my first big kid job. I was, fresh out of college, whereas all my other coworkers had other jobs previously, which is only to say that my salary was significantly lower than my coworkers, and which normally wouldn't be a bother for me, but it was a slight bother because I lived in a very, a very expensive area. And I noticed that my output was significantly larger than my older peers. So I just said to myself, I think it's time to look elsewhere because I'm doing better work than people who have been here longer. But then on the flip side of that, you don't want to leave a career thinking that you deserve more, and then in reality you don't, and then you just don't find employment. So it's an honest conversation that you have to have with yourself. So before we wrap up, I just want to thank Sam, Caitlin, Katie, and you guys, the audience, for coming out tonight. And before we leave, I just want to give Sam and Caitlin an opportunity to kind of impart any final tips or advice to the audience today. We'll start with Caitlin.
So thanks again for doing a great job leading us, Preston, and for having me. I think the last tips I would have to kind of sum up how I feel about all this is talk to people, make connections, tell people what you're thinking, what you're feeling, do your research online, take online, career aptitude tests, look at, salaries of things. Glassdoor is a great way to look at salaries in the area that you live, the average salary for a position. Look at that labor market information to get a good idea of what you're getting yourself into. And really, more than anything else, the human side of things, check in with yourself frequently and honestly, and ask yourself, am I happy, studying this in college because it may one day become my career? Or when you start working, am I happy doing this job? What is it that I like about this job? What is it that I can't stand about this job? I think that people are all entitled to be happy. And I think that, the world is better and you are a better worker when you're enjoying what you're doing. So be really honest with yourself about what does that look like for you.
Oh, that's great, Caitlin. I think the only thing I would add is really don't shy away from talking to people that are in careers that you might be interested in. Like, I'm relearning this right now, and I also experienced it right after college, is that people love talking about their work. Even if you want to, talk to someone who's in a career that you're considering, you don't know exactly, right? Just grab coffee and just ask them, even if it's like someone you might find on LinkedIn or even Glass, and like schedule what they call like a info interview, right? A surprising amount of people love doing it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be close friends, but also close friends are a great starting point as well. But talking to people and on safe platforms, and reaching out to them via message, and making inquiries to actual people, not just, looking at listings, but talking to actual people. I mean, that's where I've benefited the most is you don't have to be alone in this process. Even if you have done all the VR workshops and have done all the training and you know exactly what you want to do, you would be surprised. People love doing it. And also I think you'll get an insight that's not normally in textbooks or online blogs or social media. That's my tip.
Awesome. So I just have two quick tips before I turn it over to Katie for any questions that we may have. The first is when you're in college or when you are first starting out in your career, don't be afraid to kind of throw yourself into different experiences, be it doing different internships, join different student organizations, because kind of in the similar vein to what I said earlier about not having as many responsibilities. When you are in college, when you are in your 20s or even in your 30s, that's really the prime time of your life to open yourself up to different work experiences. Also, when you're in college, you have access to a pool of professionals, be it professors, individuals that you may have been networking with, who you may not have access to later on in life. So, when you're 45, 50 years old, when you've been removed from college for so many years, may not have access to those professors, to those advisors in your college who are the best people to talk to in many instances, because they can give you direct career advice and direct leads to potential careers and positions. And they're right at your fingertips. Whereas if you've been removed from that setting for a while, you may not be able to take advantage of those resources. So I would always say, try to lean on whatever network you have to either lead you to a potential job or just to give you advice to getting into a specific industry. The final bit of advice that I would like to give is we've been hammering on and on this entire hour about careers, about salaries, about, pivoting and all that. But one thing that I think you guys need to remember is a career is only as great as the life it allows you to have outside of that career. What I mean is, if you could have an amazing career, it gives you great benefits, you can make well over 6 figures, but if it's going to be, negatively impacting the rest of your life, it may not be the correct fit for you. So, for instance, I have a friend who worked in investment banking, and they made almost $200,000 a year right out of college. Didn't need a master's degree, didn't need a PhD, anything like that. But they were making well over 6 figures. It was amazing. They got to live in all these great cities, got to travel, but the hours were terrible. They had to start at like 7 in the morning. They didn't get home till 11, 12 o'clock at night. And they had to work weekends. And that begs the question, like, for them, that they left that job because they didn't have a life outside of their career, outside of their work life. When they were working 17 hours a day, and some days, Saturdays and Sundays, that just wasn't right for them. They didn't have a social life. They weren't able to kind of go out and take advantage of the great city that they lived in. So I guess the takeaway here is, whenever you are considering a job or a career, always try to envision how that would impact you outside of the workplace. Because if you are, it's kind of cyclical, because if you are negatively impacted with your social or physical life, it's going to, of course, negatively impact you in your work life. And with that, I'll now turn it back over to Katie for any questions that we may have.
Great. Thank you, Preston. Thank you, Caitlin and Sam. Wonderful job as always. Great information. If you have a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat. We have just a couple minutes. We're right at 9 o'clock, but we can probably answer a question or two. We did get one question come in through the chat from Felicia. She's just mentioning she has been connected to some organizations, but is having trouble finding services for female veterans, and wanted to know more, needed more information about vocational rehabilitation opportunities. So is there anything that you guys can share on, I guess, just connecting with voc rehab in your area, or any kind of quick tips around that?
So I know that website, it's not VR specific, but if you're looking, Felicia, for like voc rehabs or for career guidance for veterans, that My Next Move website has a whole page on looking at the skills that you might have utilized while serving in the military and how those correlate to different jobs. So that's a good resource. And I would say just try and get in touch, do some research, call like a state representative. All of the voc rehab agencies are funded by the state and also by federal dollars. So reaching out to like a state representative might help you. Just doing a Google search could also help you as well, in terms of finding who your voc rehab agency is. Also, if you have a group like the National Federation of the Blind, if they have a state group, you might try and reach out to them, and hopefully someone there can give you that information as well, to put you in touch with the right person.
Thanks, Caitlin. It does not appear that we have any questions at the moment. If any questions come up after the webinar, feel free to shoot us an email. I'll put our email in the chat, but it's csp@envisionus.org or .com. And feel free to reach out to us, send us an email, and we will get answers to your questions. Oh, we do actually have a question. Kiva, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. My question is for Caitlin. My field is social work. I have a master's in social work. Is there certain resources that you use, specific resources that you use to find social work jobs?
Yeah, great question. So when I started my job search, I looked I use my website of preference is Indeed. I find it's the most screen reader friendly for me. And I would just type in social work and see what came up. There's also a website in my area. I live in Connecticut, which is a specific website for Connecticut nonprofits. And that is often where I found jobs. I also currently work right now for the state of Connecticut. So I would go on the website for your state employment. And a lot of times you can find jobs in the different agencies. So I work right now for the Division of Public Defender Services, but your local Department of Social, or for the state you live in, Department of Social Services is often hiring social workers for case management, for benefits, Department of Children and Families, as well, Department of Mental Health, you know, different schools that are in your area. School social work is another great avenue. You know, those are some good things. I'm happy to help more. If you reach out to Katie, I'm glad to email with you a little bit and maybe give you some more state specific ideas if I can.
Okay, thank you. Great information.
Okay, well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you again, Caitlin, Preston, and Sam. Always great having you guys on these webinars. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Hi, everyone.